Well, I don't think there is any one representation of a person. Sketch in the eye. Drop in around the mouth. Go back and make a drawing again. You lose part of the face. Paint it in again. Introduce a color behind the head. Then you start to see the details. People exist because we create them, and we create each person differently. Who is the real person? I wanted to be a painter. The hell is a painter? You know? What is a painter? He's a guy who makes pictures. Who cares whether you paint or not? Nobody. Nobody. And it's no ego trip at all. It can't be original. There's paintings everywhere. Everybody writes, everybody paints, everybody does this, play music, sing songs. Everybody's got an opinion. You hang your pictures on the walls, your friggin' life, you know? People come up and go like this, it's crap, you know? But you can't believe them because you know different. You think you know different anyway. Even my mother wouldn't hang my paintings in the house.
Notice, you know, God, he said he's committed every sin there was to commit, so I could have, you know.
When he looked at you and spoke to you, you knew he was actually looking at you and speaking with you and listening to you and caring about you.
All ça veut dire. It's going to be complicated, you know.
You know, one look in his face, you know that he accepted you and loved you in a very special way.
Jerry told me down in Fairland, he got gulls that he found on the beach, old rotten birds, and he let them rot in his studio in bottles and on shelves so he could smell the stink.
Jerry was a genuine article. He was an artist's artist. He didn't play the life. He didn't act the life. He was of the life. I was told that I was sick by a birch tree. I was upstairs on the second floor of my house. It was getting late in the evening. It must have been about, I don't know, it was early spring, so it was getting dark fairly early. Lamplight, I saw, and I wasn't feeling my best, and I knew I was, you know, something's wrong. So I looked out through the window, and I saw the birch trees that are on my deck, just outside my deck, and they were shimmering like this. And suddenly, my mind accepted the reality of being sick. So I thought to myself, well, I'm going to have to record this. A moment when the mind finally gives up and says, you better do something. Because if you don't, you're going to fucking die. I thought it was me that was dying. Later on, I find out that there's a bug in the birch trees, and they're all dying. And there's some connection, some natural connection that I had with nature. It doesn't really look like a lot of my work. It's quite different. And then I thought, well, maybe that's the direction I'm going to go in when I find myself paint again. Paintings change all the time, right in front of your eyes. Look at those reds. I never even knew they were there. Wow. Beautiful.
Did I do that? Maybe I did. What's in my mind at the moment, if I could only just pick it out and stick it on the canvas, would be a beautiful painting of fairyland below the lighthouse. And I love the texture of that peat bogs, you know, Jesus, it's so beautiful. Black and it's burnt sienna and all kinds of stuff in it. So my plan is to just to cover those two canvases.
Jerry was uprooted person. See, like myself and Jerry went to Ronconnor East. We're painting there for a while, for a week. Steady painting down the coast and that. Always taking us up the coast. Anyway, they're going to have a party for us now. This Saturday night, so the place was blocked. All the locals up in this fella's house, by the Jesus, there was booze, St. Pierre booze flowing everywhere. And Jerry was wearing a blue jacket, but I'll never forget it. By the sweet Jesus, for the rest of my life, I'll never forget Squires that night. And all of a sudden, at all the laughter and accordion playing and everything like that, Squires gets up and leaves. Why did Jerry leave? Everybody saying, why did Jerry? I don't know why Jerry left. So in the morning when we got up, I said, Jerry, the boys want to know why you left the party last night. Jerry said, they're having a party, but little do they know that this place will die like Exploits Island. And he said, I wept and I went home because he said, I thought about my hometown where I grew up. And he said, up there I experienced it all, the laughter and everything, but he said, when they'd resettled, that's what I felt that night.
I was born in 37 in Notre Dame Bay. All my people were all preachers, right? Salvation Army officers. I grew up in a very religious house, born in a very primitive area, nothing to do with the arts. I was born on Change Islands, for God's sake. No pictures on the wall, nothing. We had Queen Victoria was on the wall. And I think Sergeant Major Booth, founder of the Salvation Army, big picture of him that would appear. We had to go to Sunday service and then to Sunday school and evening service. And so our whole Sundays were full of preaching. My mother was a very good preacher. And we had one book, it was the Bible, you know, and which I read inside and out because I was anxious to find out what was going on. I was supposed to be a Salvation Army officer because my history was in the Army, Salvation Army. And I was one chosen by my mother to make that tradition happen. And it never did. But I found that I could, when I found a pencil, I could draw. And people were sort of amazed by that, you know, like, hey, this kid can draw.
His insistence upon perfecting his technique, his craft, and the lengths to which he went to express what was in his mind and in his thoughts suggest a depth of involvement with what he was doing that far exceeds what most of us do in our day-to-day life.
I think he felt an affinity with Europe and with continental artists there.
He created the palette that he's known for. There was no palette before then of what he needed to do.
He was looking for roots, for little plants, you know, for trees, you know. But in France, the trees are not crooked like here, see? I was amazed at the way he looked at the land, you know, the way he looked at every rock, you know. You could see that he really want to show what his roots were in Newfoundland, to show the wind, how hard it was, how harsh the country was.
I don't mind dying. It's not death that bothers me as much. It's just being useless. Hard to do. I'm so used to coming down here and flicking off a few canvases. But no more. Can't do it.
I have trouble trying to focus on what I'm doing. It's not coming out the way it usually does. I couldn't get the paint from my easel.
Better put on my,
I missed the canvas.
finger. I'll get paint all over me again today.
This experience of coming close to death may lead me into other areas. I may not paint at all. And when things look really bad, that's the time you go to work. So I knew what my next moves are going to be instinctively. I couldn't, you can't really say which ones, because they're all different each time. The dance is different, it's a different dance. The texture will be different. And I'm going to just change that section up there now. My first exhibition I had in Toronto in 1956 at the Birch Library. I was just finishing high school and I sold 4 or 5 paintings. I think probably it was more the people bought them because they liked me or tried to encourage me, but it did give me hope that in the future I could possibly live as an artist. But by the time I was 18, I was in New York City, and I used to go to the Metropolitan Museum to paint Cézannes, copy Cézannes. I was told by my teachers, they said, if you really have trouble with your painting, go and look at the masters. So that's what I did. I was there for about a month. I think I painted all the Cézannes they had. I was walking through, I was really tired, and I saw the corner, I saw this Rembrandt. Little small Rembrandt, head of Christ, about this size. Maybe 15 inches wide by 30 inches deep. It's a Rembrandt. And it's sitting right on the corner. And when I saw it, it's just the way the light was or something. I fell to my knees. And I said, what is this, you know, like, how can he do that? It was so strong that I fell to my knees. And then I realized something very interesting. I realized that paint, a manipulated paint, can create an emotion.
If you're causing a physical sensation in someone, if you want to make them cry, for instance, why would you want to do that? Isn't that some sort of abuse?
Yeah, you're
that
really,
you really want to inflict on somebody?
Yeah. My feeling is that the art itself is one of the great lies. Even as a visual artist, you sometimes manipulate people. You have to twist the words in order to tell the truth. Do we really need to go into other people's psyche and try to manipulate their feelings and emotions in order for us to be successful? How paint can be manipulated to create an emotion in people.
How do you feel about that?
Well,
the idea of the artist being a thief, like you are a thief.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I suppose it's a thief in a kind of a nice and gentle way. Everything we do, somebody else has done it, and it just seems it goes through another channel. The big lie is an attempt to find the truth. I may have to make adjustments to the way in which I view the world or see the canvas. The need to create, see, is still there. Sickness is part of the whole process. How are you going to draw it? Break down, the body's got to break down. The mind has to go. It all happens inside you. It all happens inside you. Trying to understand what you're doing here on this lonely planet all by yourself. And nobody can reach you, nobody can talk to you, and you're lonely, right? You're lonely in your own thoughts. So I have no answers, but I have a lot of questions.
We met in June or July 1960. We met in Toronto, and we met in a pub. The place was crowded, and we realized these fellows were lawyers, apparently. Mom said, now, you should latch yourself onto a lawyer. I saw the back of one of them, which turned out to be Jerry, kind of like the shape of his back. I pointed at him and I said, no, Mom, there's the guy I'm going to marry right now. Just for fun, I guess. I kind of glued my eyes onto his back and sort of willed him back. Jerry wrote his address on a little matchbook and said, I'd like to do your portrait. And come up to my place tomorrow at 3 if you could.
Classic pickup line.
Tell me about it. But it was pretty good, I must say. I went up to his place at 3. Well, we've been together more or less ever since for 55 years.
It was understood that you had to have a job in order to paint.
Miranda was born in Toronto in an apartment next door to the Maple Leaf Gardens.
And I got a job that was art related, which was working as a newspaper artist.
We'd just come back from visiting some friends in Toronto, and I went into labor. Esther was born pretty fast too.
I did illustrations for books and magazines and that sort of thing. That was just understood that you'd starve to death if you didn't otherwise do that. I was away for 15 years in Toronto, and when I came back to Newfoundland for the first time, that was in the 60s. As soon as I set foot on the landscape of Newfoundland from the ferry and took that drive through the Codroy Valley, it was unbelievable feelings I had at that time. It was as if, I've arrived. This is where I'm going to make my life.
Jerry is part of the renaissance of Newfoundland art. See, he's part of the beginning, when everybody started to produce art in Newfoundland. And you know what Newfoundlanders are like? A lot of them are afraid to get up and speak, afraid somebody will say something about them. I was at the Artists Coalition of Newfoundland and Labrador. Well, sweet Jesus, all of a sudden Jerry jumped up on it. I'm sick of New mainlanders coming down here telling us how to run the arts in this province. He said, it's time all us Newfoundlanders stood up and ran the art scene ourselves.
But when I came back, the resettlement program was just happening. And people were leaving this, what I tried to get back to, they were leaving, right?
By force.
Yeah, by force, yes. In some cases, yeah, most cases. You'd see all the old photographs and that floating in the water, and houses being destroyed, and beds out on the landwash, and it was a shock to my system.
When Jerry came back to Newfoundland and so on, he moved out to Ferryland.
When I I first moved into the lighthouse in Fairyland.
We were in Fairyland from, I guess it was 1972.
And I said, I've got to live out here.
So he brought me out to see it.
It was sitting on the edge of a cliff. And I was in nature.
It was a cold, miserable, rainy day.
I would look out my kitchen table and I could see the ocean. And it was just so beautiful.
I was looking around, I seen the wallpapers falling off the wall.
It spoke to me that it's something I had to do.
Damp. There's no electricity in the house.
Birds, the wind, the rain.
A lot of the windows are out.
The cliffs falling down to the ocean.
2 little kids, right? You might fall off a cliff or something.
It was nature itself, the rolling hills.
And we've got no money. We had no money.
I've got to understand this. I can't live in a city and come out here and paint. I've got to live in my own painting.
And I could hear them say $80 a month, right? And I'd sort of laughing to myself, $80 a month, right? And I've got $80 right now. So anyway, gradually the rent came down until it was $5. When I heard $5, I said sold, right?
And the party'd go good, and Mick McGuire would get over playing the piano, and me and Jerry says to me, look at that Contro. Why, you're not going to get that everywhere you go, just that liquor Contro. So myself and Jerry got pissed on the Contro.
Gail asked him to go pick up a loaf of bread in town, and he came back a week after.
Jeez, I'd like to go home. You know, this is a bit long. 2 o'clock in the morning, Jerry. My Jesus, how long are we going to stay here? Jerry said, on the daylight. Well, buddy, we had our steak dinners, and we stayed till around 5 o'clock in the morning, and Jerry said, it's time to put on some toast now and have a cup of tea. He said, before we goes home. I couldn't believe it. The whole friggin' night at the same party. So he didn't know when to go home.
Drunks, druggies, and hippies, I'd say.
Well, yes, they said that about us. There were a lot of people who were attracted to the lighthouse just because it was a lighthouse. And a lot of artists, all kinds of people came out there.
I went out the side there and there was an elephant coming over. I said, well.
We were in town to a party and we decided that we were going to go to the lighthouse.
Didn't expect to see one of you guys here. Okay if I call you Tantor? I don't know that's Mowgli in the Jungle Book or Tarzan.
My late husband Charlie had too much to drink, so he said, you drive.
And it came over, and I said, what would you like me to do? It put his head down on his knees. It wanted the inside of its ears rubbed with my knuckles.
So we drove right up to the lighthouse in a station wagon, through the Narrows and everything, 4 o'clock in the morning.
You want me to give you a tour of the dig and out of the lighthouse? Yep, it picked me up with its trunk, put me on the top of its head, and the owner was going right fucking berserk.
I had had my hair done, and it was all up on top of my head in rolls and everything.
Who is that man? That elephant walked right over and talks to him.
When we got there, it must have been close to 5 o'clock, so Charlie blew the horn and kept blowing it. Next thing I sees Jerry in the window looking down.
Jerry was at the lighthouse at the time. He called out to Gail, who was in the front room. Gail, you gotta come quick, you're not gonna believe this. There's an elephant coming up towards the lighthouse.
He opened the window, it wasn't cold. In the name of God, what are you doing here?
Oh my God, it gets worse, sure sitting on top of his head.
I yelled out, open the door, we're coming in for a drink.
I said, George, you want to come out and meet him? I called it Tantor, I'm not too sure if that's his real name.
Which he did, and we stayed up all day then drinking.
Jerry was scared. He said, oh my God, no. That's a full-grown elephant. I said, yeah, nice big cuddly elephant.
But then Pablo Casel's on the cello in the morning, you never forget that. It was almost like a cathedral, and it reverberated throughout the lighthouse. You know what he sounds like. Yeah.
When we were in Fairyland, we had a boy, a child, who died 3 days after he was born. And we watched it in this cage, a glass cage,
It was all, it was dying, but it turned its head and looked up at us. When I was doing my boatman paintings, I didn't know where the images were going to come from. I knew I wanted them. So what I used to do, I would prepare my canvas in a straight sort of way. I'd splash paint everywhere. I'd look, if I couldn't find an image, I'd rub it out, start again. I'd throw paint here, daub there, sit here, and that would spark the imagination. And you'd see the image incomplete on the canvas, and then you would complete it. It was like magic, because once you saw it, you could draw it. We were dirt poor. We had nothing, so the child never got a marker. He never got a stone. He never said Damon Fraser Squires. That was his name, on a stone. He went out with the garbage in the hospital. That started a whole exciting thing to me. And it all happened because somebody died, right? The death of this child was almost impossible to bear. But it got me going. Very. I came back to the lighthouse, and all I could do was just make this memorial painting for him. That's all I could do. I took it from Dylan Thomas, Time is Burying Another Son. God, 12 paintings, and then I started doing lithographs and drawings, and I did all kinds of other things. So it was 5 years before I exhibit them. But he would be like 40 years old now. Yeah. Close to 40 years old. He would have been a man, married, had family. If we tried to forget, tried to put it out of our minds about this kid, this child, this beautiful child, but it's still there. Can't. But just to get by day, we tend to hide things, to forget things, to not pay much attention to our sufferings, but to carry on, because you have to. So what's going to happen now?
All I know is that this stuff was hard on him, for sure. Having to go into those areas and, sort of open yourself up. That's hard, right?
It led me in the right direction, without my knowledge. I had to be a painter. That's all. I knew I had to be a painter. And I did everything I could in order to make that happen. And I made other people suffer because of it. I made my family suffer. But fortunately, I married the right woman who could understand what I was doing. And my children grew up underneath my easel. And we became friends. We didn't become like father and daughter or anything like that. We became friends. I never trained them. I never told them about religion. I didn't want them to be stuck in some kind of brainwashing. But that freed me as well. So I had no responsibility. I was thinking about myself, basically. I do believe that human beings, if they didn't invent things, invent their gods and their religions and their art, they'd all go mad because there's nothing there.
He went up on Pennywell Road and he found a tree. There was thorns in it, the thorn tree. So Jerry asked Buddy, could he borrow some of the branches off the tree? Buddy said, what do you want that for? And Jerry said, I'm going to wear them. Buddy looked at Jerry and said, oh yeah, boy.
I think spirituality is more as a mystical connection with nature.
The stones that I paint, for instance, have a voice. They tell you things. They have a voice. They're so old and so wise. And your lifespan is 80 years. Theirs are 80,000 years.
Put him in a circle and put him on his head. He said he could feel the pressure of the thorns into his head.
If it wasn't for the Catholic Church, most of the great art was made when people believed in God. And those things are the most beautiful. There were people with great doubts that taught that fishing shed was not appropriate for the Lord. And then I decided I was going to use all my atheist friends as apostles. It wasn't meant to offend. It was meant as a statement of what Christ himself did. But when they saw my version of it, they changed their mind. What I was doing about the Passion of Christ is that I was making him into a human being.
Well, as I started to paint, I couldn't believe it. Because out of my soul memory, his face appeared. And I finished the painting in one day. Just one day, on a 40 by 60 canvas. And I did. I created Jerry as the way I think that Jerry would walk into my studio and say, by Jesus, if I look so good, boy, don't I? I really did a great job, you know, to have that honor bestowed upon me by you.
When he was showing at the Maslow Gallery in Toronto, Helene said, listen, I could make you into a top Canadian painter if you'll just play along, right? Play the game.
I never heard the term play the game. I never heard that term at all.
Jerry turned on her. No way he was going to do that.
If by play the game, you mean that you were going to paint the subjects that the gallery insisted you paint, I never encountered that.
Because he'd shoot himself in the foot every damn time, right? He had the opportunity. And I'd see it and I'd say, Jesus, you know.
There would be nudges, little nudges. You better stick to still life, for example, because, you know, good at landscape, you know, that kind of thing. And for God's sake, don't try portraits, you always screw up.
Maybe it came from his mother saying you're as common as sheep, right? Don't get too taken away with yourself. But I do know that, you know, he certainly had many opportunities and he turned every one of them down, right?
Jesus, I'll tell you a story now, buddy. And this is a good story. We all went down to the airport. They're gonna have all those big paintings at the airport, you see? You got to do have a proposal. And Squires said he's going to do caribou crossing the Barrens, see? On a great big canvas, you know? Here Squires already knew how he was going to get the fucking money at the airport. So when me and Stuart and Sid Butt and all of us over at Carboneer, we goes down to the club into the airport getting pissed. So Squires and all there, and Sid says, I never see as many gangsters in one room in my life. We looked like the fucking mafia, boy, the whole lot of us. But we came out of it. I didn't do any proposal. I said, frig that, I'm not going to do that. Stuart said, I'm not going to do a proposal. Gee, geez, we goes to the airport. I did to go off to Toronto somewhere. And here Squires is a big painting of the caribou on the wall. See? That's the difference. Squires did it. He took advantage of every situation he could.
He was at different parties, and the word going around was, I don't know how Jerry and his ego can fit in the same room together. And so I told Jerry, thinking it would give him a laugh. And he said, Stuart, you don't know what power I have. I've got so much power. All I have to do is make one phone call, just one, and you're finished as an artist here. And his buddy Deswell says, yeah, as he makes a phone call, I'm going to beat the crap out of you. Well, okay, bye. See you later. All kinds of stuff we did together. And going for hikes and out in the wilderness and all that. We were just like two brothers.
You got to learn to love yourself. And that is probably the most difficult thing of all, is to love yourself, because you know what an arsehole you are.
It's very difficult to predict how much his work will become known outside of Newfoundland and Labrador. In fact, I'm not even sure how it will become known.
His presence was vast. Just by walking into a room, he never wanted to be a star or anything, you know. But he had his presence.
You know, he was good in poetry. He was good in writing. He was good in sculpture. He was good in drawing. He's unique. You can see a painting. This is a Jerry. This is it. It's what it should be. And an artist, you should be able to see. This is Jerry. This is Picasso. This is Matisse, and that's it.
Whether that will ever be recognized or not depends on the tastes of curators and art historians.
And at the same time, he did seem to want that, you know. He wanted it, but he didn't want what came with it, I guess.
At the end of it all, maybe it was just a joke.
Yeah. He was afraid he wouldn't recognize himself anymore.
As we get closer to the final image, certain details have to be brought out. But sometimes a light will pick up a twig or a branch or the trunk of a tree, and it lights it up for you. I go away from the painting, come back to the painting, say, geez, I should have done this. So I'm forcing myself in the last years of my life to stop fricking around with the details. In the back of my mind, I'm doing a portrait of Newfoundland. Curse God and die. You've done your thing. My mother wanted us to read the Bible, so every day we would read a chapter between the four of us, 3 boys and my mother. I was raised by my mother. My father was off to war somewhere. We went all the way through the books of Moses, you know, and into Esther and all kinds of other things. And then we ended up on Job. I was fascinated by it. You know, what the hell did I know about that kind of punishment and horror? I've just recently worked with Boyd Chubbs on a book of Job. And Job is my hero. God called his sons together for a conference. They're going to have a conference call. And Satan was with him. And God asked him, where have you been? What have you been doing? He said, well, I've been walking up and down on the earth. I thought, Jesus, Satan, you know, and God together. But Job's God, a nasty little piece of work. And then Satan says, you know, what do you think of my servant Job? He says, well, he's a wealthy man. He's got everything. You gave him everything. He's got beautiful daughters, 7 great sons, cattle. He's got sheep. He's got camels. He's got everything. But he said, if you took that away from him, he'd curse you. And he says, oh, yeah, okay, go ahead and torture him. and see what happens. Right? Let's have some fun here. So he goes down, he burns his house down, kills his daughters and his sons. Everything Job ever had, he did away with. But he never touched his body. So he sat there in the ashes, moaning and groaning. 70 years it's been somewhere in the back of my brain, so going, making his turns. You're given all these talents and these blessings, and suddenly it's all taken away from you. But he said something very interesting that I don't know if anybody else picked up on this. Job said, I never cursed him with my voice. Of all the torture he went through, he said, I never cursed God with my lips. Very important. Because what's going on inside, not even God knows.
you have to go through the process. That's the big one. If you could only just not have to go through the painting process, and just, if you could only take that image out of your mind and make that a work of art, that would be superb. A finished painting, they call it finished, but a finished painting, there's no such thing as a finished painting. A finished painting is a painting that the artist has abandoned. Jesus Christ, I said, you gotta give me some time, right? I got so much to do. You may not understand this, but I have a lot to do.
Our hearts are saddened to lose one so dear. The death of Gerald Squires brought many a tear. The artist that gained recognition and fame is hidden to glory on that heaven-bound train. Up jumps the conductor with the flick of his hand. He said, I'm Arch Williams, the lead in command. Up speaks Edith Goodrich from down in the back. Said, you're heading for heaven and you ain't coming back. The gates of heaven will swing open today as all the disciples lead the train on its way. A feast up in heaven will be laid out quite grand to receive our disciple from our Newfoundland. All of the angels will be happy today as all the disciples lead the train on its way. The angels in heaven will dance and they'll sing for all the great paintings that Squires will bring. The angels in heaven dance and will sing of all the great paintings that Gerald will bring. It's hard to remember everything about Squires, but one thing I do remember is that it was hard when Jerry died.